Welcome to the Alternative Dog Moms podcast. I'm Kimberly Gauthier, creator of Keep the Tail Wagging. I've been blogging about raw feeding, pet wellness, and life as a crazy dog mom for more than 10 years. I've seen massive improvements in my dog's health since I began raising my dogs naturally, and I'm passionate about sharing my experience to help other pet parents.
I'm Erin Scott from the Believe in Dog podcast. For more than 10 years, I've been researching and learning everything I can about healing cancer, allergies, autoimmune, and mystery illnesses in both my dogs and myself. And I can't wait to share with you everything I've learned in case it could help you too. As the Alternative Dog Moms, Kimberly and I are bringing you all the latest dog health news that we're following and the brilliant people we're meeting along the way. Now let's get started. Hello, Kimberly.
Hello, Erin.
This is our first time recording in person.
Yes, it is.
And we have the most specialist of special guests with us today.
Rodney, Habib, and Dr. Karen Becker. They have joined us on the heels of the Forever Dog Life, and we're just going to talk about it. We're going to have a hard-hitting conversation.
Listen, we're so excited to be here. I'm very excited. I'm also very excited to be in your house. I have never been in your furniture is impeccable. So thank you for inviting us into your home.
It is.
You're welcome.
It's beautiful. Thank you both for inviting us.
Thank you for being here. We're truly so excited to get to talk to you. And I wanted to start taking it back a little bit to when the Forever Dog came out. And my recollection, because it's a couple of years ago now, was you were investigating like blue zones for people, Dan Butner's work. You're like, are there things like this for pets? Factors that, can keep our pets long with us for a long time, right? So am I right in my recollection?
It's an awesome, the journey for the longest lived dogs is basically the way my small layman brain would put that together. Traveling, looking for the longest lived dogs, and then taking that information and giving it to the world's top longevity scientists to break it down, to decipher it, to see what they can see in their lab and through their expert eyes, and try to bring it into bite-sized chunks for the pet parent.
Was there ever any geographic connection with there are more long-lived dogs in any certain areas of the world?
That research hasn't been done. But that was also my question is the blue zones that have been identified around the world, do dogs in blue zones potentially live longer?
Right.
And I emailed Dan Buettner and asked him that question, but he did not respond. But I don't think that anyone's ever actually investigated if dogs in those, because in theory, dogs in those areas would be eating similar foods if they were fed from the table, but they would be within the same water quality or air quality. They'd be in the same environment. And we know that environment is potentially more important than diet when it comes to health and well-being. So unfortunately, we don't have an answer to that question because no one knows, but it would be a great third book.
Yeah.
It's awesome though when you do kind of try to look for correlations. Like as an example, we were really excited and we didn't have the opportunity to go to Sardinia. Sardinia, obviously one of the blue zones, lots of centenarians come from that location. And it was so we were so enamored by the research that was coming out of it. We were like, hey, what if we get on a plane and go to Sardinia? And we travel around, we go meet vets and we ask these questions. What is your average lifespan here in these zones? Could we see a correlation? One small, you can see some hypothetical anecdotal correlations, like Portugal as an example. Bobby, arguably the longest lived dog in the world, wherever you want to put that beautiful pup with what's happening in the space today. But if you look at Portugal, what's fascinating about it is that only 10% of the population consumes ultra-processed food. So there's a lot of long-lived people that come out of Portugal. Obviously, A plus B doesn't equal C, but it's pretty interesting.
So yeah, you mentioned there's a stat in Forever Dog Life that 20% of health is genetic and 80% is environmental. And that's why all these choices that we make, all these choices that you cover in the book are so important because they all add up to an almost bigger factor than even the genetics.
And we learned that from the Broad Institute at MIT, and it's a 90-10 split for people. So 90% environment, 10% genetics. But because dogs have been so overbred, humans stopped breedings with their cousins and mothers and, sisters, hopefully, 1,000 years ago, whenever they figured out that was a bad idea.
Yeah.
Puppy mills have done really irreparable damage to our dogs' genetic lineages. And we have a lot of work to do do damage control on the reparative conformation when it comes to gene deletions. Many dogs are just literally lacking the DNA for health. They're missing the genes for healthy heart function. They're missing the genes for healthy kidney function. So until we can address the genetics, and that also accounts for the extra 10%, which is why dogs have a 20% genetic correlation, we have work to do with the gene pools. But that still, to your point, leaves 80% within our control, which is also empowering or terrifying, depending on how much you know. Yeah.
And then we touched on like the ultra processed foods, and it says for the US, 60% of people calories are ultra processed foods. And obviously we see so much cancer, autoimmune disease, diabetes. And of course we see that in our dogs if vets expect 100% of their diet to be ultra processed. And I'm just always like, why is there such this disconnect?
Yeah. Well, and Rodney found stats. Those stats were correct when we wrote the Forever Dog.
They've gone up.
Rodney just told me last month that I think it's up for like teenage kids in the US, teenage to young adults. I think it's up to 85% of daily calories.
In the United Kingdom too, it's very scary in there. So what we're seeing now is 70 to 80 here in the United States, almost 90 is what I sent you
of calories a day.
Children in the UK.
Yeah.
So those statistics are going up, and you're right about the disconnect. It's why is it, and we say this all the time, why in human nutrition, when you speak to your doctor, they're like, hey, try to avoid eating as much ultra-processed food as possible. Try consuming as much minimally processed food as possible. But why is it in animal nutrition is upside down? Why are we told by medical professionals to avoid feeding our dogs minimally processed foods and to feed them more ultra-processed foods because it's science? It's completely upside down. But the good news is today, our generation and the new generation, we're asking more questions. Yeah. We're not gonna settle for the answer that ultra-processed food would obviously be better.
So I'm going to partially disagree with you, and I'm going to explain why. I actually don't think it's really upside down. I think that many of us who have doctors who are open to talking about diet and things like that, it's the same thing in the pet space where if we have a holistic vet that's open to all these things, we forget that there are people who have a vet that will escort you out the door. So I think that there are a lot of doctors who don't really talk about the cure. They just give you a drug. And this hit me recently because I went to the doctor, and my partner Johan did, for the exact same thing. And I got if you need pain medics, you can do this. You should sign up for acupuncture, go as long as you can. And just that's what and for him, it was like, okay, so we're going to give you an injection and then possibly surgery. And they just went down a completely medical route. And that's what I see in the pet space, where we're given the solution, or not even, the solution. It's like, we're going to make your pet fat. So, hey, here's a drug that now will make your pet skinny, instead of saying, okay, let's look at how many calories your dog is consuming. So I think the reason why we see all of this in this pet space as intently as it does is because it very much is mirroring what we're seeing in the human space.
Yeah, and so it's an interesting concept because it's reaction medicine versus proactive medicine, right? But I think what I was referring to by the upside down philosophy is typically when you go into a human doctor, you don't see the selling of ultra processed food, right? Yeah. And normally, if you've got a good physician. Now, obviously, there's
Lucky
many
Charms.
Yeah. Can you imagine, right?
Total, because it has a multivitamin. It's 100% of what you need. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. So what I mean by upside down is the fact that normally, and I'm sure there are some people out there that have had a human physician that has probably maybe not made any reference to what's going on in the diet and what could potentially be happening, but they're typically not selling you from the human clinic ultra processed food. Yeah. And hopefully you have a good enough doctor that can tell you otherwise.
And I think enough are aware that diet is an issue. Enough are aware. Yes. Whereas in the pet space, it really is a non-conversation. Yes. And it's surprising to me. And so I'm going to take over. Go ahead. And say, so this brings me to last year we interviewed Dr. Barbara Royal. And one thing that she told us was, she told us about her background and basically going from the traditional of what you start with to more of a holistic approach. But along that path, she saw benefits with other people. But when she found out what they were doing, she immediately did a knee jerk back to what she was taught. And I was wondering if there was a time where that was the same for you. And when you initially started seeing veterinarians get ostracized within your community?
So I'm an outlier in that I grew up in a really healthy family. I started feeding raw food in vet school and my dog got really sick. I knew I would never sell kibble out of my practice. I knew I would graduate and be a proactive vet. I'm not a human that got frustrated, saw, oh my gosh, what are we doing? The medical system's broken. I got to help fix it. I'm going to switch how I practice. I went in knowing that I would be doing what I'm doing now, but that's really rare. What I have seen is that model of when you're in the 4 years of veterinary school teaching you, like our nutrition course is basically nothing, oftentimes taught by representatives of the ultra-processed pet food company. And we're not taught anything about fresh food. And if it is, it's that it could be dangerous and that most diets are nutritionally incomplete. Those are just basically stay away from it. So vets graduate only knowing what they've been taught. And if nutrition isn't a passion for a graduate, for a brand new veterinarian, it's not even on their radar. Just like many humans go to their physicians and your doctor doesn't ask you, what are you eating or how's your lifestyle? Your doctor prescribes drugs for your symptoms. The nutrition conversation doesn't come up. But a little bit of difference between veterinary medicine and human medicine. If you do have questions about nutrition, first of all, there are many human doctors that realize the system's broken and start pursuing integrated modalities. They pursue nutrition. They pursue getting additional training that expands their toolbox. And that's great. They end up practicing different. And then we seek out those physicians because they more align with our viewpoints. Veterinarians, but within the human medical field, with medical doctors that have no background with nutrition, if you ask, hey, could my eczema or my skin rash or this be related to something I'm eating? They will say, hey, we have nutritionists, MDs want to stay in their lane, and nutrition is separate from medicine on the human side of things. So they'll refer you to see a nutritionist or a dietitian. In our practice, there's only 125 board certified nutritionists. So if you're a conventionally trained doctor and you have a client that comes in and asks about food, and if they don't like your response, if you can pick something out of the waiting room, I'll sell you something from the back room that's by prescription. If that answer doesn't satisfy them, then we don't have a built-in group of an automatic referral to nutrition. So the veterinarian doesn't have any tools to be able to respond appropriately with resources.
Yeah.
Have you met Dr. Lindsay Wendt yet?
No.
She's going to be coming up. You'll love her. She's got a great story where she was almost what you were referring to, where she practiced as a conventional veterinarian. She got stuck. Her dog got sick. None of the modalities. She couldn't find answers. And so she reached out. She started looking for answers herself. And then she started reaching out to some integrative veterinarians like board certified veterinary oncologist, Dr. Trina Hazza, who helped her. And now she's on this incredible path. She's got a very beautiful story. I got to introduce you guys. You would love her. She'll be coming up, so you'll see her soon.
Okay. So about the book, the recipes, and I'm sure you guys have heard the feedback on the recipes. And one of the things is when I was flipping through the book, I looked at it as a normal recipe book where I don't go and pull it out every single day and cook the meal that's on this page. It's just not feasible. So I didn't look at your book as that way. But I did price one of the recipes. And so for the person who is like feeling like these recipes are out of their price page, my thought was, what was the thought behind the recipes and why did you give them to us in this way?
What an awesome question.
Yeah. Well, you should talk about, first of all, your vision of the whole. First of all, Dan Buettner's big inspiration to Rodney.
He was a massive inspiration for me. And this is such an awesome question because this was maybe the hardest task we ever had to take on as 2.0 pet parents, right? So when you and I are having a conversation, we're always, us four, we're always going to be on a same level of communication. How do we talk to people that have no idea, which I meet every single day? Just the other day, I had somebody cleaning out my AC unit and he's like, dogs can eat human food. How do we talk to those people? How do we talk to scientists? How do we talk to veterinarians? How do we talk to 2.0 pet parents? And then how do we talk to all the food religion communities? How do you talk to raw feeders, prey feeders, kibble feeders, canned feeders, if you're a kibble feeder, grocery store feeder, veterinary feeder, premier boutique kibble buyers, like how do you talk to all of these communities? One. Two, how do we put together resources for people that if we want to show them to what minimally processed foods look like, and knowing that in the United States of America, the average consumer can only afford or is spending $23 a month on pet food. How are we going to talk to those people? But at the same time, those that are either blessed or have the ability to purchase and make these foods whole foods or organic, and those that don't have the money, how can we bring supplementation to reduce the costs immensely? How can we tell people that it's not all or nothing? That maybe if you do make this balanced recipe, rather than putting all of it in a bowl, only using a teaspoon versus the entire, making the entire amount. That was the monumental task that we put together. But my blessing was that I have Dr. Karen Becker and her team of colleagues that were able to oversee the project, bring in their own input, bring in board certified veterinary nutritionists, bring in veterinarians, bring in pet food formulators like Steve Brown. It was quite a project. But
I really want you to touch on the whole themes around the world. You're pretty obsessed when you, so let me just give a background for people that may be listening to this podcast. Book number 1 was like the heavy hitting science. And I wrote that book during COVID where there's nothing else to do. So you just sit in your depressed state and type for a year and a half. That's what I did. Rodney did all the heavy lifting on this book. Like he took all the photos, writing a cookbook, the actual written words, which was my part of our relationship, was writing his part as photos and, images and beautiful things, the communication that way, the visuals. So my little one paragraph that you write is the easy part. Doing all those recipes was really, really hard. But what he said was, I want this to be an international. He wanted it to be Blue Zone Dogs. He wanted it to show recipes that with themes from literally around the world. And so when he said that to me, I want an around the world theme. So when we were talking about like kind of the avenue of how to approach, do we use supplements? Because the whole community of people saying, I would never use supplements, to help reduce the cost. And then we have people saying, I would only use whole foods. Like, why would you ever add supplements? So how do you make everyone happy? What we ended up doing to really meet his vision of having these international culinary diversified recipes with a lot of different ingredients that provided all these different foods for different microbiome support, that both have supplemented options. And then I talked to my people who, when we get together to create recipes, board certified nutritionists, Steve Brown and Susan, we're like, okay, we want to be able to actually make this metabolically healthy and be calorically correct. So we had to get everyone in the same room on the same page to create these recipes. We also took into account Steve Brown's passion is feeding homeless dogs or people that are very, very, very tight on budgets. And his statement is, we want to be able to also show how to use human leftovers for toppers and treats. So the front half of the book, the not complete and balanced recipes part, is showing how easy it is to add in our healthy human leftovers that can dramatically improve the health and nutrition in our pets' bowls, regardless of what you're feeding. And that's a tall task to make all those different pieces fit together. So if you have the money to feed a whole food recipe, it's going to be crazy expensive, but not necessarily more expensive than premium food that you would be buying at the store. One way you can reduce the cost is, of course, to use the recipes with the supplements. And then a lot of people are not even making the complete and balanced recipes. They're just sticking with the bowl add-ins where they can really supercharge their pet's bowl by using healthy human leftovers that they were already feeding to their family. So we try to make everyone happy, understanding that we'll never make everyone happy.
But the complexities, Kim, imagine, all right, I have a diet, but then there's so many different stages that a pet can be in. Are they a puppy? Are they a senior? Are they an adult dog? Is it a cat? Is it a kitten? Is it a senior cat? Is it, low movement, sedentary animal? There are so many factors that you couldn't get one diet to work. So then you had to get these incredible, brilliant minds to formulate over 450 combinations. We needed a website because we couldn't fit it all in the book. We're like, there's no way you could fit all these pages in the book. And then how are you going to prepare it? Are you going to feed it raw?
Yes.
Are you going to cook it? Are you going to crock pot it? Are you going to it changes the schematics of everything. So it was like, is this possible? And if we can do this, how do we take on this monster of a
and
task?
for me, just as a backstory, one of my passions is I wanted to silence the board certified veterinary nutritionist community. What is silence them? Which means everyone has criticized every fresh food recipe book out there ever.
Yeah.
So for those of us that don't balance everything meticulously, we know that we don't have to go that route. But if you want to, our goal was to make everyone feel comfortable feeding something out of this book. And what we wanted a resource for board certified veterinary nutritionists to feel comfortable referring to. And that's within their scope, that they recognize that all life stages meals are not ideal for any life stage, that, it kind of highs and lows, but there really is enough differences between life stages and caloric intake for different metabolic states and activity levels, that if we can make everyone happy, but by providing options for what their goals are, we're able to cast a wider net on who would potentially make these recipes.
And how can they be regional? Last thing, because this is such a long-winded, like I've already blown the podcast with again. But then the challenge of bringing in international recipes. Mm-hmm. How do we go to all these different countries where so many people are preparing so many different dishes?
Yeah.
I think it's dish shy.
Perfect. Dish shy. With all of their local spice eyes.
With all their local spice eyes.
Which, yes.
How do we take all of those? Obviously, our largest audience is our American-based audience, so making those ingredients available to them. But knowing that the first book was translated in 22 global languages, once those books, like South Korea and China just picked up the Forever Dog Life, can they find those ingredients there? That's another That's another monster in itself. Believe it or not, this book, we tried to bring on National Geographic to help. And just because of schedule, we brought in one of the beautiful writers, but because of scheduling, it didn't work out, who helped and write the Blue Zone book to help us assist with some of these ingredients globally that we can make them accessible to people all around the world. So, imagine you've got to cycle all throughout that idea before the book even comes to life.
Yeah. So the book has a lot to it. And one of the things that, to me, the book is beautiful, and it was fun nerding out going through the book. But Erin and I we recognize that, there are a lot of people like us, but we are unique when compared to the majority of dog owners. But looking at it as someone who may be new to all of this, and I say that because Rodney was generous enough to donate your book to my Bella's birthday party on Saturday.
Happy birthday, Bella.
With her siblings.
Happy birthday.
And it's, it wouldn't be right for me not to have goodie bags that have all of this health stuff. So I'm grateful to, like Real Mushrooms, Real Dog Box, and others who donated to that gift basket, which is really nice. So thank you.
Yes.
But where would people start? They're in this book, they're hit with it like, oh, this is a lot. And it draws you through. But if I am new to all of this, like, is there like top 3 things that you would suggest I go home and just start focusing on today?
Boy, that's such an awesome question. We front loaded the book with, first of all, trying to break down the concept. As you said, how do you talk to somebody new? Okay, first and foremost, let's tell them a little bit about the industry. So if you didn't read book number 1, so it was really important to us that we gave you you're only allowed so many pages. That's the other problem in the publishing world. No one knows that, because people, when the first book came out, why didn't you talk about spay and neuter? Why didn't you talk about over-vaccinating? Why didn't you have 480 pages. She had to remove like 3/4 of the book because of the cost of the book, and you're trying to make it accessible to everyone in the world. You got to haul pages out. So when we put the second book out, we were like, okay, without wasting all of the precious pages that we have, let's put in a pet food section. Let's familiarize the audience with what is minimally processed, and ultra processed. Let's show them the NOVA classification system and what that means. Also, let's build a adulteration chart. So that very famous little adulteration chart in the front of the book where it's a general guideline, because it's not black and white. There's so much gray in that food adulteration chart, but let's show people how to level up. So if I can only afford to do this, how am I leveling up in the book? And then when you open the book, let's start talking about our top 5 favorite foods. I know superfoods is such a cliche term today, and some people don't like that term, but let's talk about 5 science-backed foods that just maybe starting there, adding. Then let's get into some toppers, because I think that's where a lot of us start in this world when you're doing something, right? You're not going to feed your dog a carton of eggs. You're normally going to have your traditional diet and then use an egg as a topper when you're first starting. So That would be my quick explanation. I know you would have more to add to that.
For me, the second half of the book, which is the healthy home part, I really wanted to set this up to where my goal would be that you open any page and be like, oh, that looks good. I think my dog would like that. I'll make that. Or I'm spending $26 for jerky. Oh my gosh, there's homemade jerky. I could start just by swapping out store-bought jerky for homemade jerky. And I also tried to make a healthy milk bone, because if you buy milk bones, just try this. It's healthier and better. So I tried to do equal swaps for what people would be spending quite a bit of money on, that they may have the ingredients at home to just buy and make on their own. So that's where I would say when it comes to treats, rather than buying treats, start with homemade treats rather than making, you don't go to the complete and balanced meal section, because that can be overwhelming, especially if you've never cooked for your dog. But the second half of the book, the healthy home, is really important to me because so many of us hyper focus on food, especially those, almost everyone I know in our community, we have a slant towards food.
Yeah.
And I have forgotten as a veterinarian about how important the environment is. And I can't tell you how many people are feeding ethically sourced, free range, ethically slaughtered, organic meats, and their animals are dying of environmentally created problems. And that's a huge thing that has been changing for me, really career changing for me, is that our animals' environment is wildly toxic, and I am not giving the same level of emphasis to cleaning up our animals' environment as I am to cleaning up their diet. So I would say the second half of the book, if you're using Lysol floor cleaner, use it up, throw it away, and don't buy it again, and switch to a homemade floor cleaner. As people use up home products, switch to non-toxic pet-friendly options. That would be my first tip.
Yeah, I think that's a great place to start, and an easier place to start for some people,
Yep.
So I've been fortunate enough to see you guys speak a couple times over the last few years, and you always have this great quote about you have to learn, unlearn, and relearn. And one of the things that you guys are responsible for me is about the research on spay-neuter and the effects of that, and Dr. Michelle Kutzler's talk with Inside Scoop. And, Kimberly and I are both in the rescue and shelter world. And, it's one of those things where how can we start to make the change? Like, why are people not being taught this? We need these ovary-sparing spay procedures to be taught. And the research is really out there to show vets, but nobody's talking about it or doing anything yet. Like, how can we get this conversation going?
Well, I not only do I feel you, sister, I have done quite a bit of damage in my career doing early spay neuters because I didn't know any better. So I feel an extra level of responsibility in helping push this particular topic along, in that veterinary schools only teach one technique. So I started this spay neuter, awareness. Really, it's a signature campaign to try and get WASAVA and the North American Veterinary School Association to please teach hormone-sparing techniques. And we have about 20,000 signatures of pet parents saying, we would like to have our veterinarians know alternative techniques. When I send this information to veterinary schools and say, this is a growing body of pet parents asking for veterinarians to learn, the whole reason veterinarians can't offer this service, everyone believes in sterilization. What we're saying is we want to use hormone-sparing options, and veterinarians need to know those techniques. And actually, those techniques are easier and simpler and use less anesthesia than traditional spay-neuter, but we just don't know how to do them. So while we're in junior surgery class, in addition to learning conventional spay and neuter, can we learn a vasectomy and a hysterectomy? And so far, no. In fact, Michelle Kutzler has volunteered to volunteer and fly to vet schools and teach the veterinary surgical staff how to do this. And veterinary schools are not taking us up on it. It's wildly frustrating. I did interview a dear colleague of mine last week from the Philippines who recognizes this issue. Philippines have a massive overpopulation issue. She does high volume spay neuter. And 4 years ago, she converted all of her mobile clinics to ovary sparing and vasectomy techniques.
So awesome.
Yeah.
It's so awesome. And there's this one woman in a third world country. And I'm like, girl, if you can do that, it gives me goosebumps, because if she can do that, she did over 200,000 procedures last year. As one woman, massive overpopulation problem, but allowing those animals to not be endocrinologically damaged because she knows better. And I'm like, if this woman can convert her country to a sterilization program. We can do this in the US. So partly what has to happen is in rescue or anyone that knows a shelter veterinarian, we need to begin teaching those blessed vets so that if you have an adoptive family that says, I love this puppy, but I cannot adopt a puppy that's been neutered at 8 weeks. Could you please do vasectomy instead? They're equipped with the tools to be able to do it. If the vet schools refuse to teach it, we just have exactly what we've done with fresh food and the over-vaccination issue. We just need to begin teaching, mobilizing through education, teaching veterinarians that are in the trenches, currently doing high volume spay neuter. We just need to teach them new techniques. And once we do that, now they have more tools in their tool belt to be able to provide the appropriate technique for the animal on the table.
And how awesome that WSAVA just changed the guidelines.
Yeah.
Right there. It's if you have a healthy animal, there's no need to spay and neuter unless
I'm also came out of rescue. That's just a crushing statement for those of us that deal with the overpopulation problem.
Though. Like now you have the largest organization in the world. Yeah.
Yes. Like all of us, I think, have our uteruses and we have not had unplanned pregnancies. It's possible with responsibility.
Yeah.
However, there's a lot of people that also have litters that are not responsible. And there are humans that absolutely should not have an intact dog.
Of course. It's good, though, to see WSAVA now backing up the science, because I think that was the argument for the longest time. There was so much science. Everywhere you looked, there was science, but it was such a taboo topic. Nobody ever wanted to talk about it. And it's hard not to. Like, as a pet parent, right? This is like not my field, but as a pet parent, I can tell you, if I go in and to get my animal sterilized and you tell me that there's two techniques, one, remove everything with the potential of increasing the rate of cancer and joint issues, or two, minimizing all of those adverse side effects by doing a vasectomy or an ovary spare, as a pet parent, what would you do? You know, if I have the possibility for my pet to be healthier and live longer in both ways I can sterilize them, give me option B, man. But at least give me that option as a pet parent.
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, all of my dogs have come through the shelter system, and, you know, I've had dogs with mast cell, with ruptured CCLs. And it's like, when I start looking at all this, I'm like, oh my God, this is exactly what it is.
It's, in fact, all of like the major issues we're seeing: hypothyroidism, cognitive issues, joint issues, growth plate issues.
Sam, my dog, for the love of God, I spayed my dog at 5.5 months. They told me to do it. She had both cancer and blew both of her ACL or CCLs, right? Like, I'm your quintessential pet parent of early spay and neuter and the issues that I had.
So I wanted to talk more about Bobby. And one of the things that's been so interesting in the long living dogs that you've encountered, like how much outside time that they get. And it said that Bobby actually had the most diverse poop biome sample that ever, they had ever seen. And so, so many of our dogs are in the house all the time, right? And, in your neighborhood, or some people that live in like a development, they spray everything with Roundup. And so you're like, oh God, do I even want to take them outside?
Right.
So what can we do to get like that healthier soil biome and environmental biome for our dogs?
Find your closest forest preserve and go there on the weekends. If you would live in the middle of New York City, if you are able to get your dog in the car and go to a local forest, because you're right, local parks are all sprayed. If you can find your local hiking trail that is chemically neutral, allowing your animal to sniff and move his or her body in a natural environment with plants, research shows does undeniably amazing things. Not only for their olfactory senses, it improves BDNF, so cognition improves, but they're also breathing in all these phytoncides that have really amazing health benefits. So in Japanese, it's called Shinrin-yoku, forest bathing. Sounds kind of batshit crazy, but the science, there's over 100 published studies demonstrating that really good things happen when you hang out in nature. And one of those things is that animals have access to soil. And Rodney went digging on the bacteria specifically.
I had to
sleep for a week.
I had to.
You didn't sleep for a week.
So every time there's a dog located somewhere, when the news of Bobby broke, when the BBC and CNN and Al Jazeera and all legacy media started posting, oh my God, the oldest dog in the world just came out of Portugal. We couldn't have gotten down there fast enough. But what I've learned on every single one of these trajectories I've been on, remember when it started with Maggie Kim, the raw milk drinking dog from Australia, Perth, that was arguably between 29 to 30 years old. it's a beautiful story for legacy media, but nobody wants to dig deeper. And so we, as 2.0 pet parents, what did the dog eat? How did the dog live? Did he eat once a day? Did he sleep and so tell me more, right? So there was nobody asking those questions back then. I was like, okay, if we have to ask those questions, let's ask them and let's find out what's happening. One of the things that we didn't have back in the day was microbiology. There was no, right. Where were you going to send a dog's analysis to see what did the microbiome look of this dog? I swear to God, when we landed, we got to Lionel's house after a giant drive up into the mountains in a beautiful village in Conqueish. I would always call it Conquitos. I was corrected. In Conqueish. We got out of the car. I remember contacting Dr. Holly again. She was like, please just give me a sample of Bobby's microbiome. Bobby, by the way, made the 2024 Animal Microbiome Report, the state of health that they put out every year. So they've got Bobby in it if you want to look at his microbiome. And then obviously Dr. Nico Kubini, off topic, the world's foremost scientist from the Family Dog Senior Project from Hungary, geneticist, cognition expert from Hungary. She has a peer-reviewed study on some of the longest-lived dogs, like Bookshi at 27. Said to Dr. Becker, please get me a DNA sample as well. But to go back to the microbiome, as we got out of the car, Bobby was pooping. Karen sprinted through soil.
I heard the theme from Chariots of Fire. I was running I had opening my cup as he was just in perfect tail. I was like, whoosh.
She got we didn't even say hello to the family. Everybody thought we were the weirdest, batshit craziest people in the world. It's true. Look at this white woman running through the fields of Portugal in the mountains. What is she doing?
You know how you can tell when your dog's going to poop? And they kind of slow down, and then I could see he's like, oh, it's a poo walk. He's so going to poop. And I sprinted across the 5-acre garden.
All the family are looking at us who are these people? Hello. Why did you invite them into our home?
He had to think I was so damn weird.
She's got soil all over.
So damn weird.
But it's also really cool. Texas A&M, the top gastric lab in the U.S., put out a peer-reviewed study, a breakdown of the microbiome, and it says it right there in the middle of it if you ever want to go and read the research. Getting your dog into healthy soil, outdoor environment will increase fusobacteria, one of the most important bacteria to have, which is a health marker in the microbiology world, but it's also the bacteria responsible for the proper digestion of protein, breaking down your amino acids properly, your brain functioning properly, your muscles functioning properly.
That is so huge if you feed a meat-based diet, right? Mm-hmm. So, and that's also why so many dogs that have dysbiosis, we put them on meat-based diets and they do horribly because they're in these sterile environments. Mm-hmm. They live in an apartment on the 34th floor and they don't have access to healthy soil and they don't have access to a natural environment to help diversify their microbiome. So getting your animals out, walking in the woods, allowing them to be dogs and, root around and smell. And if they want to roll, allowing dogs to be dogs in a natural environment is one of the best gifts we can give them. And if not, buy organic food at your local farmer's market and don't clean it. When those carrots that come with dirt, kind of brush them off, shred them up and eat them, give them to your dog. Letting your dog eat some naturally occurring microbes that occur on fresh foods is a really beautiful gift to their microbiome.
Oh my gosh. Well, thank you guys so much. Congratulations on such a beautiful book. And we're so excited to have you here with us today.
Yes, thank you.
What a pleasure to be on your show. And your first live show, is it? It's so exciting.
Yes,
listen,
in the lounge.
Let's cut to this camera over here. Look at how incredible Kim's couches are. Great job. Fantastic.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us, guys.
I also feel like we could just spend the whole afternoon here. We could just order in some room service. We could just keep going.
It could be a TV show.
Yeah.
Literally.
Literally. Yes, it could. Yeah.
I love it.
It'd be awesome if we had an ashtray and cigarettes.
Yeah.
Exactly. That's all
Exactly.
It's good.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.